This episode of Monty's Minute is brought to you by Netflix. For a free 30-day trial, head on over to netflix.com/GamebreakerTV. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Monty's Minutes, where you've got questions about the video game industry, and he's got answers. This episode is 16 for January 2nd, 2013. I can't believe we made it. Monty Sharma joining us as always. How are you, sir? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Gary. Hope you had a good time.
Oh, I did. I'm just trying to catch up. Get back with the pace.
I know.
We've got some great questions for the first episode of 2013. Let's just jump right into it. So first up, from Lucas Mages. Lucas says, thanks for the great shows again. With trailers like the one from Crysis 3, showing off how powerful these new engines can be, and at the same time seeing that even a new generation of consoles could, at best, be as powerful than a normal gaming PC. I think you're talking about like a $900, $1,000 price point. Mm-hmm. Where are you seeing the development of graphics going in the next 2 years? Will consoles always slow down the PC, or will there just come a point where there's a real gap breaking open between the two? So best regards and happy, successful 2013 to you as well, Lucas. So what do you think?
It's an age-old question. So there's actually a few things here. One is consoles, even when they first come out, a new generation of console usually is a fairly mediocre hardware spec when you compare it to top-of-the-line gaming PCs. So, if you look at like the PlayStation 3, there's a trivial amount of RAM that you have to work with when you're a software developer. It's I think it's something like 2 gig or less. I mean, it's trivial. It's the sort of thing that console makers will put out hardware that they can sell profitably, and they try and keep it out there as long as they can. So what you have on the console side is software developers work really hard at optimizing their engine, their graphics, their performance, all sorts of things to work within the limitations of the console. And that's why you get these nice looking games on consoles. Now, the other benefit that consoles have is it's a standard hardware platform. So if I'm building for PS3 or Xbox 360, I know everybody has the spec. On the PC side, you actually have a much more powerful machine. If you look at a gaming rig, you have a much more powerful machine than you do on the console side. But I take you back to, we talked about it, I think, last show, the Steam hardware guide, or Steam hardware survey. If you take a look at that and you see the percentage of machines that have, the higher end video, or they've got, lots of RAM or i7 processors, that sort of thing.
It's very small.
Very small. And so when you're a game developer, and you're building on the PC, you look at it and you go, okay, console, I know what kind of specs, and I'm going to optimize for those specs. PC, all right, so do I want to hit 80% of the people who use Steam? Do I want to hit 50% of the people who use Steam? And that's the kind of thing that makes you initially build for a lower sort of spec target on the PC side. And that's really the push and pull of it all.
Yeah, the hardcore gamer is always looking at it from the point of like, we're used to upgrading our graphics cards, like some of us. I mean, I don't know, like that's the one thing. I upgrade that probably once a year at least, but that's not the average person. Why do you think consoles though, I know, because I'm just hearing the question in my head from gamers out there going, well, if you're putting out a brand new console, like why wouldn't you at least on the initial launch just max it out to the point that it's just like super uber kicking, smoking graphics, CPU and tons of RAM. Like, why don't you give the developers more to work with so it has like even a longer life cycle? Yeah,
so hardware is one of these things that I'm a hardware whore. I like new hardware all the time. I'm always angling to get new hardware, but I hate hardware as a business. And the reason is it's hard, it's complex, it's expensive. I'll give you an example of, I can't say much about it because their NDA was vicious, but worked with a company who wanted to build a handheld gaming device. And what you work on, what's called the BOM, the Bill of Materials, BOM, that's what the total assembled cost of the item that you're shipping is. So when these guys were putting together the BOM for this handheld, the hinge was actually more expensive than the CPU because they wanted a certain, they wanted a certain open-close feel, and the CPU they wanted as cheap as they could get because they were heading for a certain min spec, right? So if you look at a console manufacturer, they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, I've got to put in, when Sony put the DVD drive into the PS2s, everybody's like, wow. In the Blu-ray, in the PS3s was, hey, here's a free drive. No one else would have done that but Sony, and Sony justified that because, hey, we're going to sell more DVDs, we're going to sell more Blu-rays from our movie division. And it'll prompt the sale of more Blu-ray players. It'll bring the cost down for everybody, which it did. But beyond that, they're looking at it and saying, how cheaply can we make this? Because we know the game developers will optimize on this platform. What do we do? And they really, I'm going to say, not so much they don't care about the software developers, but the guys who are doing it are hardware guys. And they're trying to, they're looking at manufacturing processes. They're looking at how many chips they can reduce in terms of what goes on the motherboard. Like, if you see generations of, PlayStation does it a lot. You've got the first one, and it's a big case. And then the next one, the case is smaller, it's quieter, all that. Well, what they did was they found a way to get more of those chips into a single chip, which cut their manufacturing costs, made it simpler to do. So they're trying to sell you the least amount of hardware they can at the price point they know you're going to pay, knowing that the software guys will, slog through all the crap to make it look good. And that's really what it is. Hardware is a tough business because, your supply chain, the cost of RAM is always going down. So everything you have in the supply chain is decaying. So you want, last minute supplies of everything. It's a tough business.
All right, next up, this one in from Jesse Joy. Jesse says, I recently tried to play a game, APB Reloaded, which I have to say is filled with aimbot users. If this is such a chronic problem, why haven't we seen any great investments of game software being able to spy on any program affecting on the end user's computer? The way terms of service is written, I'm sure this wouldn't be a problem. Thanks, Jesse Joy. I think you have, you kind of have a lot, you know a little bit about APB, don't you?
Yeah. We worked with APB and we worked with Gamers First. So good game, really cool game. One of the things before we talk about aimbots, let me say, people who play first-person shooters, multiplayer, are far too quick to call cheat and aimbot on things. And, I can tell you that I am a fairly lousy first-person player. I'm just not very good at it, but we were, what was it? It was Combat Arms. So we were working on Combat Arms, so we ended up playing a lot of it. And I got to the point where I could kill people more often than I got killed at low skill level. You're in there and you're getting called a hacker and you're getting booted from a server because they say, hey, the other players vote you off, and it's like, wait a minute, I know for sure I'm not cheating. But let's put that aside and say there are cheats and there are aimbots and they
exist. Yeah,
there's wall hacks and all of that sort of stuff. And this is kind of like copy protection. There is an ongoing battle around what you can do. And so, in terms of software architecture, this is not actually correct, but it will give you a sense of how some of this stuff works. So if you think about, how does an aimbot work? Well, it's trying to read the data as to where the other person is, so you're lining up your shot the right way. How do you do that? Well, you make a low-level call to the memory address, which has the location of your target in it, and it feeds that back to your gun, and it intercepts that call that's going through. So that's a pretty nasty thing. And they've built things, and there's Punkbuster, and every game builds some things to stop it. But this is like an ongoing arms race. So they do something where they send less information down to the client. Great. The hackers find a different way to do it. All of these sorts of things are constantly going back and forth. I remember I played Edgeworld, which is a Kabam game. It was fun, city building, blah, blah game. And I actually ended up in an alliance that was fairly high functioning. These guys wrote a script that read our enemies' resource holdings. And they came up with a list of, hey, we're at war with these guys. These are the people holding the most resources that you should attack first. That's going to do the most damage. And that sort of thing, and Kabam changed some of their APIs, and these guys responded to it. I've since stopped. I'm not part of that anymore. But it's that sort of thing that goes on constantly. So they try and make it so there's limited amount of cheating that's there, but you're never going to get to the point that it's 100%. It's just I've had game developers tell me that they're dealing with people who are using dynamic RAM scanners, and they're spending way more time than the game company has to fight the hack to come up with one advantage.
Is it really I will never understand FPS botters and hackers. I just don't get it. I don't get why you want to play the game and cheat and just not have any skill at it. But anyway, is it a big industry though? Because I know some of these sites out there that for aimbotting and stuff, they charge monthly fees that are sometimes higher than the cost of some of the online games that people are playing just to have access to the hack.
Yeah, and it's, I'm going to say it's not a big business. It's not a good business. It's the kind of business that one or two deviants could be, hey, you've got enough money to eat and live and maybe do all right. But it's nothing that you can really base a company on. And as soon as they find a way around your hack, either you've got to keep up with it or, you're out of business. So it's there. I look at it like copy protection. Every time, and this has been going on since I used to get software on cassette tapes. They do something to protect the software, and an hour would go by, and somebody'd have a hack to, here's how you do it, and that keeps going. So it's a pain. I think, if the vast majority of people play fair and like to play fair, and something we're going to live with as an industry.
And I think, in the words of John Smedley's tweet, he called them a bunch of scumbags, I think, last week. So,
yeah,
I agree, because they really are. All right, next up, this one from Kevin Kane. Kevin says, Olivia Grace, one of our Gamebreaker TV writers, posed a question on chat bubbles, and I immediately wanted to know what Monty's answer would be. Which is more important for the longevity of an MMO, the PvE content or the PvP content? Also, you have a great group of people at Gamebreaker. Keep up the good work, everybody. Kevin Kane, thank you so much for watching.
So that, my gut reaction to that is it's the PvP part. And I think it comes down to the PvE, the storyline, all of that stuff is really good at pulling people through content and training them how to use different classes and maximize damage, all that sort of stuff. But the rate that people can go through the content gets you to the point where you're going to blow through it. You cannot keep up with the players in building content. So what you really have to rely on, and what MMO manufacturers realize is, all right, it's all about that end game, and what do we have to do? Well, let's give you stuff to collect. Let's give you achievements. Let's give you PvP, and let that roll. And if you look at EVE Online, the only MMO that's grown consistently over the last 10 years, without popping open big new geographies and things like that, it's all because the PvP creates its own storyline. And, I think that's something that developers have realized in these large-scale games is if you don't let the players become part of the story, you're not going to have enough stuff to keep them entertained.
So do you think the industry is going to go back? Because I don't want to say go back to that, but it is a bit more of a Sandbox MMO is kind of, it died a bit when World of Warcraft really blew up. We didn't see many of them come out, but I mean, you go back to Ultima Online was much more of a sandbox, giving players tools and seeing what they would do with the world. Do you think we're going to see more companies actually investing in that?
Well, it's something that cuts both ways. So the beauty of the storyline and the PvE stuff is it really trains the user on how to play the game, and it keeps them engaged, especially at low levels. And that's what Warcraft did an awesome job at. Everybody knows EVE has a learning curve that's a bit more like a cliff. You go in and you're just going to get your butt kicked for quite a while. So I think, what Warcraft showed was, hey, if you actually have a really nice PvP environment that pulls people through, educates them, and I remember when it first came out, people were complaining, oh, this isn't really a hardcore MMO. Look how easy it is to level, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey, they got a whole bunch of people who didn't play MMOs before in there. Now, what happens after that, what happens in the world and how they manage, all of that stuff, that's what keeps, players at it much longer than, they've hit max level.
All right, next up, this one from Oleg Brodsky. Oleg says, hello, Monty and Gary. Love the show. Thanks a ton for doing this. I enjoy your banter and knowledge that you drop each week. It says, my question goes back to a previous episode where Monty mentioned the game challenge that Mass Digi is running and how pitching is incredibly important for it. I'm looking forward to presenting at a game at the game challenge and was hoping you could help out. Specifically, I was curious what separates a good pitch from a great pitch. How to tell if your pitch is where it needs to be, and how to tell when your pitch is written for the wrong audience. Wow, great question. Says thanks and hope the show goes well, Oleg. And actually, the next question from Jesse Joy out there has something similar, so we'll kind of package these up. Jesse says, what's the best way to take your story to a video game company? So kind of the same question. Wow, how do you know when your pitch is just awesome? Yeah,
and that's a tough one to answer. Let me talk about pitches and some of the stuff I've been part of. So Jesse, the simple answer to your question is, how do you take an idea to a game company? Well, you put together a pitch document, and a pitch document or presentation will usually cover things like, what platform is it for? What target market are you hitting? Give me a sense of what this game is very quickly, what's unique about this game, and then getting into the scope of what it actually takes to build it. So, if you look at those things, what sort of takes you from good to great ends up being things like, you have to very quickly tell somebody why this is a really neat concept. And so, I've been a part of a few pitches where, and I was the guy on the sidelines, I was not the main piece there, but, they went in and they had a really cool idea for a twist on a game that we've all played. And so they go in and it's like, hey, here's our pitch. It's a mobile game. We're going to build it in Unity. We're targeting iOS first. And it's this game done as a asynchronous multiplayer. And right then you see the eyes light up in the guy you're pitching to. Now, the folks that you're pitching to are usually publishers or they're companies who produce a lot of games, all that sort of thing. What you present to them, so that whole scoping piece, depends a lot on who you are. So if you're, Joe Schmo or Jesse Joy, and you don't have a pedigree, you're going to go in and you're going to say, hey, here's my great idea. And they're going to look at it and go, yeah, that is kind of a cool idea, but we're not going to touch it because we don't have any sense of your ability to scope. We don't have any sense of your ability to read the market. If the person who's going in is established game developer, they've got a name, they've got pedigree, depending on the company, some of them will fund a limited amount, here's 25 grand, 100 grand to do a prototype. But more and more, what I keep hearing people say is, we don't fund without a prototype. So you've told me this game has this real unique twist, right? And this is what makes it fun. Show me. Just give me a vertical slice, give me something, give me enough art that I understand what this looks like, and give me enough of the play that I can say, yes, this is right. And I remember last year when we were judging some of the things in the game challenge, you're there and the discussion turns to, okay, so this is kind of interesting and that's kind of interesting. And in all reality, we have no idea which one's better because we don't really know without a prototype. And so, a prototype can help you a lot in that it really shows that fun, or it can kill you because you put the prototype out and somebody looks at it and they go, okay, this is derivative of 20 other games I've seen. That's nice, but I'm not going to fund it. So when you're taking an idea to a game company, whether you're established or whatever, it really comes down to putting together a simple pitch. Like, this is something that you can do quickly, you can deliver quickly in 5 to 10 minutes. And then the rest of the time is really conversation. But that's all you need. And most people, when they go into pitch, they come in with 4 or 5 ideas, right? And all of them are equally great in the eyes of the person who's delivering them. What you're looking for is what hits on the person who's making the selection. Hey, I've seen tons of games like this. I'm not, I don't want to do another one. Hey, this is neat. This is a game I really want to play. I like it. Let's go a little deeper into this. You don't know. So you go in armed with a few pitches and you find where they land.
So your suggestion is definitely to have more than one pitch, though, lined up for one meeting. Like, okay, don't go in there with one idea. You need to go in there with like 3 to 5.
Yeah, you can do one idea if you're employed in a game company and you're going up to an exec and you've really focused this idea. Sure, go in there and say, hey, this is a little project I've been working on. Bam. Okay, cool. I'll give you a fair hearing. We'll see what happens there. But if you're going in to a publisher or a developer that you don't have a relationship with, it's going to take a few ideas, and they're going to say, yeah, don't like this one, like this one. That's kind of interesting. And you'll latch onto something. But let's be clear, if you're just coming in off the street and you're trying to pitch a major developer, odds of succeeding are pretty close to zero, no matter how great your idea is. So
now what about an Oleg's situation where he's got a presentation and he's working on it and he's trying to now get it from possibly a good status to great? I mean, how do you, especially when you're usually practicing something like a pitch by yourself and you're kind of enclosed in that box and you don't really have a lot of outside perspective. What do you do?
Well, it is, you want to seek other people to sort of look at your pitch. And, for people who are competing in the game challenge, this year we're actually going to restrict all the teams to just one pitch for the sake of time. But, run that pitch by a bunch of other people before you get there. Really focus on, am I clearly explaining why this is fun? Can somebody wrap their head around it? Can they visualize what we're doing? So, understanding what that game is. And it's usually done by throwing out, a couple of other games and say it's like The Sims meet WoW. That's the concept. Now, let me tell you why that's fun and why that's interesting. And I throw out the Sims Meet WoW because no one's ever used that, and it's probably a bad idea.
I was gonna say, could you explain that and pitch me of how that would actually work? Well, okay.
No, I'm afraid of using a good sounding one because it might be what I've heard from somebody.
Very true.
Trying to be safe here, but you throw that out. Look at your prototype and say, does this prototype actually help my pitch? Does it show the fun? Is somebody really going to latch onto it? And is my prototype good enough that I can let somebody else lay their hands on it, or do I have to run it? How fast and how long do I run that prototype? In reality, you don't need to run it very long. I know one group that actually lost out because they ran their demo too long. And what happened was that they kept talking, but one person on the team keeps playing, and the judge looks at it, or anybody who looks at it, after a while they go, this looks like a lot of the same stuff. And it's not too much. You gave them too much. If you gave them just a really short snippet and they go, I get it, I see your art style, I see the play, because you've built the prototype, I have more faith in your ability to scope the project, then I'm willing to do it. And scope is a thing that people repeatedly mess up on, and even major players mess up on this. And the scope mess up usually goes like this. I want to build this game, The Sims Meet WoW, and I think it's going to take 6 months to build, a team of 20 people. I'm looking for, a couple $1 million to do it. Well, when I get into it, I find that, wow, to get all the elements of The Sims balanced with the fun of WoW, again, this is just an example. It's a bad idea. Nobody should do this. To do that is much harder than I thought. And it's not 6 months, it's 12 months. Or I get 3 months into my build and I don't have the fun. So, experienced game developers will actually, they'll say things like, you can't say this isn't fun yet because we haven't added, a crafting system or an achievement system or whatever else. If your core gameplay isn't fun and you need to test that early on, the game's not going to be fun no matter what you add to it. It'll be a good-looking piece of tofu.
Is there someone? Because again, I'm thinking back to television and film and how it relates, and I would think like somebody was pitching it with the same question. It's kind of similar, but a person who would maybe have better insight on how long it would take to make a television show and the budget and things like that would be a line producer, right? And if you're in LA, you could easily find a line producer who has a couple days off in between jobs or something and pay them a few bucks to kind of look at your idea and line it out for you. Is that something that people could do as well in the game industry? Are there people available like that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of rules of thumb, and somebody looks at it and says, this kind of game on this platform, you're looking roughly at X, right? The problem with games, which television doesn't suffer from, is you can't tell, well, television suffers from it a little bit. You can't tell if a TV show is going to work until the whole cast is together and you see how they play off each other, whether or not that show has good energy, right? The script could be awesome. It could be well written. It could be funny. But
true, but things go over budget, but they usually can figure out like this is how many weeks it's going to take. This is what you need for your team. This is your field team, and they can kind of break it out where they're pretty close, much closer than somebody who's in it, like just trying to break in the industry with an idea would have.
Exactly, and so they're closer, and they have some sense because they have a script and they do a read through with some actors or whatever. That this sounds good. This sounds fun. We should spend money on this. When you're building a game, that fun, fun is the balance, the drive, I've done this and now I want to do that. All of those things, you try and do it, the developers I know will try and build that mechanic first in the rawest form possible. The guys at Bastion actually did an awesome job, and I think you can find it on YouTube, where at PAX East last year, they had the first prototype they built of the game running next to the game itself. And when you looked at that prototype, you said, I know what these guys are trying to create. And so, I think that's where a lot of game developers sort of stumble, is they start down the path and they say, well, this isn't quite fun yet, but when we add this, it's going to be fun. And, I hate to say, but I guess a lot of times if people would look at it and go, this isn't fun yet, it's probably not going to be fun. Let's move to a different project. And now, depending on how the contract's written, how much cash you have, there's tough choices to be made. But it's finding that fun is brutal.
Interesting. The fun factor is always the hardest piece of the component, isn't it? Monty Sharma, follow him on the Twitter at Monster, MONTSTER27, Montster27. Monty, always a pleasure. Be back next week for some more stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at Gary again, and you can follow Gamebreaker TV at Gamebreaker TV. And we're going to be doing a big initiative on our YouTube channel, so make sure to go sign up and subscribe to our YouTube. It's youtube.com/GamebreakerNation. Get over there and subscribe. And we will see you more next week for some more Monty's Minute. Send in those questions. Sending them into Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. Send all your questions to Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. See you next week.
See you here.